Actually, words, phrasing in a proper way or in a good way. That reminds me one very important point of yoga. In yoga, there are 5 principles for our relationship with others. And one of them has to do with the words that we use. In the Sanskrit, it's called satya. So applying satya means whenever you say a word or a phrase or you express yourself through words, that expression is benevolent and is to bring welfare to the people or to other beings around you, and also based on truth. But it's not just plain truth, it's a truth with the intention of promoting welfare or benevolence.
Yeah, that's interesting you bring up not just that concept, but that truth, it includes the feeling, right? Or it includes some kind of intent that goes with it. And that's something I find that is, this is again, I guess, talking about a problem, but to bring it to a hopeful place, I guess, is we have a tendency to want to make less emotional language, like certain demographic. I think the crowd I tend to hang around with is very intellectual, tech geeks. We like to make stuff. And I had a conversation, it got a little bit heated, and there was a reaction. I asked somebody, I said, okay, but can you explain your point of view in a way where I don't have to feel about the point of view in order for your explanation to make sense? It's like your explanation that it was about the student loan forgiveness. Mm-hmm. So the Biden administration has been considering just wiping the slate with some student loans, right? And I don't want to go into the details of that debate per se, but this person's point was, that's terrible. People should be culpable for he was very upset about the suggestion of this idea. And I thought, okay. So it was just one sentence, and it just swearing like, oh, this is so dumb. And I'm like, okay, can you make your point in a way where I don't have to feel the same way about the topic that you do in order for that sentence to make sense? And then it turned into a very long discussion where whenever I brought up the idea that the sentiment or the emotion behind what was being expressed was necessary for the meaning to occur, that kept being seen as though I were saying emotion is bad, because the reaction people were giving to me was like, well, you're being very emotional with your language. And it's like, well, yeah, I'm not hiding the fact that emotion is the driving force. This use of less emotional language is just confusing our mind into thinking that there's reason that's just there, and there's observation and logic, and it just stands alone. But it doesn't. It ultimately doesn't stand alone. It needs something to motivate it, something to give it the meaning. It's ultimately a feeling that we have inside. So. And that was the point I was trying to make. I don't think I did it very successfully, because once the emotions get very riled, and especially when it goes towards anger or something like that, the communication was difficult. But maybe by the end of it, I think I got through to some extent. But then it went to a different level, I guess. It went to more like, now the person who was sort of convinced by what I was saying, but then that same person feels like now they turn to self-judgment and, oh, well, now I'm a bad person. I was wrong.
I see.
You get what I mean? So
yeah.
There's that aspect of it too. So I've had some success. Like I've gone from, well, here's an angry debate, to the person finally going, okay, well, maybe the point you're making is correct, to, well, but if you're right, then I'm bad.
Understood, yeah.
And
means it continued as it didn't get to the point you wanted.
No,
means
because
it went from one side to another, but it didn't go in the middle.
Right, or even maybe even it's more than two-dimensional. Maybe
Uh-huh.
he needed to come somewhere over
Uh-huh.
over here, and I guess what
Well,
it,
it might have become something like, I'm right. Oh no, you are right, so I'm wrong. Instead of understanding the situation and saying, oh, so this is the situation. It doesn't mean that somebody has to be right, somebody wrong, but just now we see the situation.
exactly, and that's kind of what I'm trying to go for is right and wrong have to do with some kind of attachment we have to a behavioral pattern, say.
Right.
Often. It's not, it's a personal feeling about this doesn't feel good or this does feel good, as opposed to something more, if I dump something polluting into a river, there's objective consequence that is not good for all the things downstream of that.
Yeah.
And while it may be good in a sense or convenient for me to just be able to dump it there, there is a way to objectively measure that there's a side effect. And so I would like to somehow convince the people who are already, like myself, wanting to be logical and wanting, to present that way, to go a little bit inside and see that their emotions are in fact driving the logic, and to not force it away, not to try to use this less emotional language, but to use emotion appropriately, to understand that it helps us interpret situations, right? It's the motivation, it's the extrapolation. I could say if I were angry and I saw a situation, I might see it completely different than if I were happy.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
And so they act like filters, and this is like, if we want to know a complete picture of the world, then we have to be able to, in a sense, arbitrarily feel any emotion and then look at it from that emotion, and then look at it from if I felt like this, or look at it if I felt like this, and to see sort of all these ways of looking at it, what's common and what's different between these points of view.
Right. Yeah, like if you see a friend doing something, you feel in a certain way. If you feel somebody that you don't like doing the same thing, you feel in a different way, but they were doing the same thing.
Yeah, no, I've definitely seen that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, maybe so what you are trying to say is that the emotion is the driving force, comes first, and then comes all the logic to explain that.
Yeah.
And the best would have been that the emotion doesn't drive or you can see it with different emotions. Then you have different explanations according to the emotion that you are, let's say, concentrating or allowing at that moment.
Yeah.
What about if you can go, let's say, beyond the emotion, and then would you say that you will get a better picture? Or?
Well, maybe. I've really thought a lot about this, and I myself feel like I try to get past the emotion, but having maybe never done it successfully, just perfectly, I don't know. It's a good question. I think at the moment, kind of what I'm trying to do is say I do a logical analysis, at least roughly in my mind. If this happens, then this will be the consequence. If this other thing happens, then this will be the consequence. And the feelings that I might have are just a variable that gets inserted into that analysis, as opposed to, oh, I have to take the emotion out and just try to look objectively. I have to consider what my own reactions are going to be. Like, for instance, I was really trying to push for turning our makerspace into a media lab, right? And to totally change direction with how that goes. But I'm also trying to build out our property here and help the retreat center as much as whatever I can do, help this artist residency, which is my primary focus, and I'm getting married in a couple months. And so I realized that there's a tendency for me to overcommit and not manage, right? So I get excited about the idea of Media Lab and I'm like, yeah, let's do this thing because it sounds cool and it's really exciting. And then I don't, in that moment, I wasn't thinking about, well, I'm also committing myself to these like 10 other things.
Yeah, right.
And I'm one human. I don't have unlimited, even though theoretically I think I have the skills for these various.
Yes.
There's a actual amount of time that it takes to occur. And
Exactly.
so lately what I've been doing is kind of going, okay, well, let me temper this initial excitement and think, all right, this excitement's going to make me commit to something that I'm not going to have time to do. And then later I'm going to feel bad that I have to say no, so that even though I'm like feeling good right now about it, if I think carefully, I'm going to feel bad about it later because there's a pretty strong chance I may not actually be able to follow through.
Yeah.
And so I'm really starting to learn this about myself and go, you know, maybe it's just better to feel a little bit bad at the outset and say, yeah, that would be cool, but I guess I just don't have time right now. And you know, maybe that doesn't feel great, but it's not that bad. It's just being honest.
Yeah.
And I don't have that long-term consequence of, oh, well, now I have to feel guilty about not following through, and then maybe that leads to, well, now it's harder. Now I kind of avoid seeing that person because I feel guilty.
Yeah.
Right, and then all these other side effects. And so I guess I'm just trying to put the emotion into the analysis so that it's part of me managing my life.